grab your neon-lit jumpsuit and hop aboard your light cycle because Disney is transporting audiences back into the grid following a 1982 sort of cult classic original Tron and the 2010 sequel Tron Legacy. The series returns once again with Tron Ares. We all know that this is going to look awesome, but is there more to it than just some flashy visuals? I have seen it, so let's talk about it. So I was not born when the original film released, and I'm just not a massive Tron fan or anything, but I did go on the ride at Disneyland, which is awesome, and one of my kids is just obsessed with the sequel, Tron Legacy, so I have been hoping that this film would be good. Is it? Well, not really, but I still enjoyed a lot about this movie. I think Tron Ares is far from a great film. I think held back by super dull characters and a script that's just never as interesting as its core premise. But I still think that its trademark visual aesthetic and music still satisfy enough to offer entertaining spectacle. I should also mention up top that you don't really need to have watched any of the previous films in order to enjoy this one, because there is an opening montage that I think effectively sort of establishes the important world building, plot details of those prior films. At the same time, it also offers plenty of nostalgic callbacks that I think will please longtime fans, including a really fun sequence that kind of recreates the now woefully dated aesthetic and graphics of the original 1980s film. And obviously, much of our understanding and relationship with technology has changed in the 4 decades since the release of the original film. And Tron Ares does reflect sort of some of our contemporary anxieties and concerns, particularly about AI. Even the recent controversy about AI actress Tilly Norwood gives this film sort of an increased sense of cultural relevance. But let's be honest, at its core, Tron Ares is still all about the vibes, and the vibes are good. The sleek, kind of neon-lit aesthetic has never looked better, and I think this film is definitely at its best when serving up sort of striking visuals to the soundtrack of its very signature, sort of pulsating music. In fact, I think the power and success of the visuals is able to mask many of this film's shortcomings. For example, an early light cycle chase scene where trails of neon light are streaking behind the racing vehicles is entertaining and visually captivating, even if the actual chase choreography feels very uninspired and oddly slow and almost sluggish. And the same is true of the third act kind of climactic battle sequence. The visuals of the AI ships are stunning, including kind of an impressive money shot, which was shown in a lot of the marketing material, of an army of drones sort of pervading the city and sort of their trails of light shown from a top-down perspective, kind of visually recreating the grid. And it just all looks very incredible, but the actual conflict itself is actually pretty uncompelling without much really happening. I think the strength of the visuals is probably most evident in their absence, because this film really loses momentum whenever the focus sort of shifts to the human or humanoid AI characters. And I think the actors themselves are fine, but almost all the characters in this are just painfully dull. Jared Leto's AI character is really interesting on a conceptual level, but I think his intentionally sort of stoic and emotionless personality just requires someone a bit more lively to play off of. And Eve Kim, sort of a tech gaming company CEO, played by actress Greta Lee, just isn't it. Now, there are hints of a compelling backstory and complicated motivations for her, but the film just never allows her space to explore any of that. And I think kind of despite all the makings of a prototypical sort of modern female protagonist, a brilliant kind of motorcycle riding CEO in a male-dominated world, she just remains oddly passive. Other than kind of an early motorbike chase sequence where she does demonstrate at least a little bit of grit and agency, she's largely reduced to just being the keeper of this story's MacGuffin, which is the permanence code that will allow the AI creations to stay in the real world. As a result, she spends most of this film just passively reacting as the story unfolds around her, and the film just doesn't give much reason to actually care about her as a person beyond just her importance to the plot. Another problem I had with Tron Ares is that the script just doesn't seem to ever fully trust its audience. For example, at one point in the middle of being chased by a bunch of bad guys, Eve stops to unzip her jacket, pull out the disk drive containing the permanence code, stare at it for a moment, then tuck it back into her jacket and resume her run. And it's just one of, I think, many clunky moments in this film where characters just make nonsensical decisions in order to smack audiences over the head and ensure that they really get what's going on. And I'm not normally one to be bothered by that sort of nitpicky thing, but there's a later scene in this involving a row of arcade machines that honestly almost had me screaming at the screen. As far as content to consider, things going on the surface of it, really not a whole lot. For language, there are probably 5 to 10 sort of minor profanities, including 1 or 2 sort of uses of God or Jesus. For violence, most of the violence in this is directed towards like non-human AI characters who burst into like purple particles whenever they die. The only exception to that is there is one woman who is stabbed in the chest and killed, although no blood is visible. And lastly, for sexuality, there's nothing in this film for that. As far as themes, worldview, things going on beneath the surface in like a not very subtle way. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein serves as the central metaphor for this film, with the classic novel shown or referenced several different times. As with Shelley's classic novel, Tron Ares explores sort of that complicated relationship between the creator and their creation. And the film just asks the question of whether AI is like inherently bad or merely reflects those who create and control it. In the movie, you have like 2 competing tech CEOs who seek to control the potential of the AI. One who desires like power and personal profit, and the other, who is Eve, who sort of benevolently wants to use the technology to make a positive difference in the world. And the film ultimately suggests that AI, like all technology, is merely a tool that can be used for both good and evil, and it kind of merely asks whether we are willing to accept the inevitable abuses of it in order to gain the benefits when used wisely. And I think that question also serves as kind of an extension of, I think, this film's deeper theme, and just the question of what it means to truly be human. Because Jeff Bridges' character remarks at one point that rather than the permanence code, he should have called it the impermanence code, since to be human is to be mortal. Because sort of like paradoxically, as an AI, Ares is essentially already permanent, and whenever he dies, he's merely just like regenerated. So for him to gain like permanence in the real world is actually to embrace human mortality and loss. I think interestingly, from like a biblical perspective, Tron Ares almost serves as a sort of like apologetic for human free will, and it can answer to the age-old question of like the problem of suffering, because the grid represents like a world without pain or suffering, where like the AI inhabitants live just by the directive of their creator. And while like the godlike ruler of the grid is more like the self-serving like Greek deities than the all-loving God found in the Bible, I think the film still shows just the beauty of free will and how like intolerable a world would be without it. And I think the film gives an example of how free will and just the experience of emotion and feeling, even if it can sometimes result in pain and suffering, is where the good life is experienced in its fullest. So in the end, this review may have felt like mostly negative, but I think despite its shortcomings, I still enjoyed Tron Ares, at least for what it is. If I were to do sort of like a numerical score, this should probably be a solid 6.5 or kind of something in that range. And I do also appreciate that there are no like problematic worldview or like content concerns for Christians to have to navigate. With a better script and like more interesting characters, this film could have been great. I think kind of a blockbuster that combines stunning visuals with a thought-provoking sort of exploration of social issues and like anxieties. Instead, the movie merely offers some flashy spectacle and like groovy music. But hey, as a Tron movie, maybe that is all it needs to do. But hey, I would love to hear what you guys thought. If you enjoyed this movie, if you're a fan, from the original, or you're just joining the series now, don't be shy, jump into the comment section, let's have a conversation about it. If you haven't done so too, encourage you guys, subscribe to the channel, become a Collider, got lots of other movie reviews, got our Faith and Pop Culture podcast, got interviews, just other fun stuff. Would love to have you guys be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thank you for watching, stay safe, and continue to collide through a world for Christ.